This is the Recovery Lab.
Here we dive deep into the struggles, victories, and hope that stem from recovery.
No shame, no judgment, just truth, grace, and inspiration.
Let's walk this road together.
All right. Welcome back to Recovery Lab. This is episode 115. I'm co-host David Sugg.
I'm Brynn Knox.
And I'm Daniel Anderson.
And we are here this week with Malcolm White. Every time I come in the studio, I do the same thing. I put my phone on airplane mode. I settle in. I kind of say a little prayer to myself. All right, be helpful to people that are listening. And I kind of go through this mode. But this week's been some extras. I get to sit with somebody that I've just admired and find just so inspirational for my recovery, for my business stuff, everything that I'm doing. Like, to get to sit and spend an hour with you. Thank you so much for giving us that hour. And I'm just looking forward to getting into whatever you want to talk about. But first of all, the work you do in Mississippi, the work you do I've done with Hal Mal, the St. Paddy's Day Parade, the work you do on MPB. Have you always been a Mississippi boy? Is this like just in your blood, or did you have to figure it out later?
That's a great question, and first of all, thank y'all for inviting me, and I'm glad to be here. Nice to meet you, because we don't really know each other, and David, it's great to be around you. I always enjoy your company as well, and the same of your better half. I grew up in Stone County, which is one county north of the coast. So that's where my mom and dad were from. We lived in Perkinston. It's a little town where there's a community college campus, Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, Perkinston campus. So I grew up there. My dad worked for the college. Town was Wiggins. It is the county seat, and that's what the little village was. And so I lived there until I was 15 years old, and then my dad became president of Northeast Community College in Booneville. So we moved from one end of the state all the way to the other end, to the hill country. And I went to high school there and 2 years of community college. Played football, actually. I was a much bigger person back then than I am now. But anyway, so grew up in Mississippi, began to leave in summers, spent 69, 70, and 71 summers in D.C., which was fascinating.
Why'd you do that?
Well, I worked for a United States senator in a summer job, like a summer internship. And what was so interesting is this senator, John Stennis, senator from Mississippi, was chairman of Armed Services, which was a very powerful, if you watch the news now, you see all of this conversation about armed services and who's on that committee, how it relates to the wars that are going on. Back then it was Vietnam. And so the senator I worked for was very involved in the Vietnam War. It was that time. There were protests. I worked in the office. I got to open the mail and sort it out and figure out all about pro-war, anti-war, who's for what. So I spent those 3 summers doing that. Later I moved to California and lived out in a little town called Los Gatos, just 50 miles south of San Francisco. Spent a year out there, worked in Silicon Valley in a little computer startup. It was a lot of fun. I was just sort of bumming around. Then I came back and finished college and moved to New Orleans, ran the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. When I was 24, I was the assistant GM of that hotel in the French Quarter. That was a great experience. And then I came back to Hattiesburg and ultimately made my way to Jackson in 1979, and I've more or less been here ever since.
Yeah.
What brought you to Jackson from Hattiesburg?
It was a job. I didn't want to come. I was very happy in Hattiesburg, and in fact, I was running a restaurant that was affiliated with a New Orleans concern. They had 3 properties in New Orleans. They had one in Hattiesburg. It was called Ichabod's. It was sort of a steak and ale concept with a New Orleans twist. And I had a great job there. And the deal was I was to turn the Hattiesburg store around and then go to New Orleans and manage one of the properties there. They had a property in the French Quarter, one on the lakefront, and one in Metairie. So I was doing that, and it was all going according to plan. And then a fellow named Joey Mitchell came to see me. He had a handful of restaurants here in Jackson, and he made me an offer that I just couldn't refuse. So I told him, I said, I'll go to Jackson for a year, and I'll work there for a year. But then I'm going back to New Orleans, where I'm ultimately, and the rest is history. I never did return.
Yeah. Yeah, you've had quite a run here in Jackson. So, our main mission here at Recovery Lab is to destigmatize recovery and try to offer hope, inspiration, people who are either getting sober or thinking about getting sober, or people who are supporting somebody who's getting sober. So I'm really interested to know, like, when did you start drinking and how did it affect those? It sounds like you were super productive through those years.
Yeah.
Did it happen late for you? Because I was not nearly that active. I mean, I was just getting in jails, institutions, near-death experiences. It sounds like your experience is very different. What was the drink like during that time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I didn't really drink in high school and college because I was an athlete. Again, I know it's surprising to people who look at me now and go, you were an athlete? But,
Badminton champ of 80.
But I was really focused on athletics, politics. I mentioned working in D.C. I was really interested in government and public service and politics and how everything worked. So I didn't fool with drink. I didn't start drinking until I was sophomore in college. And when I started drinking, I wasn't a terrible drunk. I drank with my buddies and what have you. Mostly I got interested in pot. I was really interested in smoking weed back then. That was kind of a new thing. I mean, it's hard for me to believe all of what I went through to obtain weed and smoke it and hide it. And I got arrested a couple of times for possession. And now you can buy it on every street corner in every village around the world.
And all those
Isn't that
seeds.
wild?
Remember all those damn seeds we had to deal with?
Seeds and stems.
Golly,
Stems and
man.
seeds, baby.
Horrible.
Really, really horrible weed. But they say the stuff now is really good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know because I hadn't had any in 20 years.
Yeah.
So I was just a social drinker, weekend drinker, party drinker, nothing horrible. Did not immediately start drinking alcoholically. It wasn't that for me at all. I just sort of coasted along, got busy with life, drank a lot because I was in the bar and restaurant business, but it never really was a problem. I didn't find myself drunk, all the time or wanting to drink all the time. But around 95, I began to have marital issues and ultimately got separated and then divorced. And that's when I turned to drink for comfort and ease and, to sort of, bury my problems and my issues. And I began to drink much harder back then. I drank really hard for 10 years. And in 2005 is when I hit the wall, when I was deteriorating faster than I could lower my standards by 2005. And that's when I finally, began to flirt with the idea that I had a problem and I probably could need to look at doing something about it, So
Before you
yeah.
go on, when during those 10 years, and you had some pretty important jobs during that time, like, did it affect those jobs or were you able to wait until afterwards and you felt okay in the morning? Like, how did it affect your work life?
There are a lot of people who said to me, I had no idea that you had a drinking problem. I mean,
Nobody ever said that
the
to me.
the vast majority of people that I associated with were clueless because I worked in the bar and restaurant business and everybody drank all the time. And people who came to my establishments, and I ran many bars and many restaurants during my career. I mean, when they would come, of course, they would be drinking, and they didn't notice that I was drinking. But I'll tell you, David, where the worm turned for me was when I began to experiment with morning drinking and waking up in the middle of the night and drinking. And at the end, I was drinking day and night. I tell people, I call myself a wine connoisseur, but what I really was a chemist because all I focused on was blood alcohol ratio. I had to have X amount to be able to go to work, pull off these things that I was doing. and it got harder and harder and harder. It took more and more, and I was less able to function as time went on.
So you were actually cognizant of this ratio. You were thinking
Yes,
like,
I
know.
was
Wow.
razor focused on how much it took for each task, each day, each meeting. And sometimes
You're managing
when
your
I would-
drinking. Yeah,
I was
let's
a
manage this thing.
I was a great manager. But when it would get off, it was ugly.
Yeah.
You know, shaking so badly at a meal, I could hardly hold my fork. You know, I remember making speeches, making talks, and just thinking that I was melting in front of everybody's eyes. Just internally, I was losing it, and I couldn't stop and drink. But anyway, yeah, it got really ugly there at the end. And the main thing that got my attention was my daughter. I began to embarrass my daughter, and my ex-wife, God bless her, had the courage to come to me at some point and say, "Look, I'm not telling you how to live your life. We're divorced, but I just think you ought to know that your behavior is embarrassing to your daughter."
Oh, that's crushing.
And it was crushing, but it was what I needed to hear
Yeah.
because nothing else was going to change my behavior. You know, I was the master of my own destiny, and, you know, I was highly functioning and getting away with murder. But when it came to that, I had to take a look at that.
Did you feel defensive at all? Like,
Of
were you in any sort
course.
of delusion that, like, she's
Of course.
overreacting? Or
You know, honestly, that's a good question. I thanked her profusely for being brave enough to tell me that, and I realized that, I knew what was going on. I knew that I was drinking 24/7 and managing this blood alcohol ratio. But I thought I was doing a really good job of managing it. But anyway, it got worse and worse, and you know, there at the end, I was just I was in denial and trying to fake it, and it wasn't going well.
yeah.
And, so anyway, my my last two stands there was a New Year's Eve. I got sober on January the 31st, 2005. But on New Year's of that year, 1st of January, I remember going down to Hal Mal's on New Year's Eve, huge night, one
Yeah.
of the biggest nights of the year. 2 or 3 bands playing, champagne, costumes, all, the
Yeah,
whole
they tell me
nine.
I've been a couple times.
So my plan was, I went down there around 10 o'clock. My brother used to put out this beautiful New Year's Eve buffet. And my plan was to go down there, have a couple glasses of wine, have dinner, and go home. And that's what I thought I did. But 2 days later, I bumped into my manager of Hal Mal's, and I said, "So, who did Old Lang Syne this year? Who led the crowd in, the passing of the New Year?" And he said, "Well, you did."
Stop.
I said, "I did?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, how did it go?" He said, "You were flawless, as always." So I must have left sometime around 2 a.m. I have no idea.
Well done.
So it's funny now, but looking back, not so much.
Yeah.
So that was a real, dialed in. Also, I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time, and I was on antidepressants, Xanax, and then I added the third component, the 2 or 3 bottles of wine a day. So I was walking around in this antidepressant, fog, popping in Xanax 2 or 3 times a day with all this wine, and things weren't going very well. So right at the very end, I went over to a friend's house. I hardly ever left home right at the end. I just sort of stayed home and drank,
There's no bars open in the morning.
Well, see,
Yeah.
I lived above a bar.
Ah.
I had my own liquor cabinet.
Oh, Lord.
And refrigerator upon refrigerator full of wine and beer. So there was never, I didn't even have to go to the liquor store. So, and then when it got real bad, when it was busy and I didn't want to go downstairs, I would just pick up the phone, call the bar and say, put 3 bottles of wine on the elevator and send it up. And I just walk down the elevator and get it and move move on. But at the very end, a friend of mine had invited me over to her house for dinner. And a week later, I was still there, sleeping in her guest bedroom, going through her wine cabinet, like Sherman through Georgia. And so she and my brother and a group of friends came over and had a little chat with me.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I went to Copac.
With Daniel, right?
Yeah, that's where I met this character.
Pakistani.
We class of 2005.
Yeah, baby, let's go.
But one thing right before that, I was seeing this psychiatrist, and it got so bad that I checked myself in the psych ward at UMMC for an evaluation, praying that my problem was depression,
Yeah.
knowing that my problem was heretofore described as antidepressants, Xanax, and multiple bottles of wine a day. I spent a week up there at UMMC, had a massive detox.
Bet.
I mean, it was voices, people in the room. I'd get up and leave, and they'd catch me wandering around. You've all probably been through this, but anyway, upon conclusion of the 1 week stay at the psych ward, the doctor came to me and he said, "I got good news and bad news. Good news is we've given you every test that we have, and you're healthy as a horse. There's not a thing wrong with you. And the bad news is you're an alcoholic, and you need to get into recovery and AA, and because that's where you are." And I was like, "Man, I really appreciate the diagnosis. That's really kind of you." I bought everybody pizzas on the psych ward, including the doctors. Thanked them very much for their time, and then proceeded to create my own recovery. I talked to everybody I knew who was in recovery about what detox was like, what recovery was like, and I designed my own program. I went down to my house in Bay St. Louis, David, and I spent 40 days in sobriety running my own program. Pronounced myself sober, went out to dinner with some friends, had a few glasses of wine, and that worked pretty well. And I did that 2 or 3 times. And then, the first time I got drunk, I was right back to morning drinking, all day, all night drinking. And
I can't believe your program didn't work.
yeah. I think I'm the first person in history to ever design their own program.
Maybe.
Oh, boy. Yikes.
You're a character.
But see, everything for me was like, I had it all like 40 days.
Yeah.
Very biblical.
That's a big thing. It's
Very spiritual.
Yes.
Yeah.
But certainly not the big book, which I had a copy of, by the way, because a friend of mine who came to visit me in Bay St. Louis some months before the psych ward tenure, she had spent the weekend in Bay St. Louis with a group of friends, and she ended up over at my house, and we stayed up all night a couple of times. And lo and behold, when she got home, she sent me a package, and included in that package was a copy of the big book. And I thought, why would she put this in here?
Is this the right package? Wrong? Who's this for?
For me?
Yeah. Checking the address.
Like, what else is in here? Must be some wine or something in there.
Well, did you get into it though? Really? When you found, did you
Didn't even look. Just looked at it and thought,
wrong house? Yeah.
How dare she?
wrong dude.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story though. That woman, later in life, I helped her son get in recovery and was his sponsor, his first sponsor.
The circle.
So if you don't think this shit don't go round and round and that it doesn't work and this isn't how it works, then you're just not paying attention.
Yeah. Do you still talk to her?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And particularly her son.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to him all the time. I talked to him the day before yesterday, I think.
That's really
He
cool.
was telling me he was working on his 5th step for the 2nd time. And I said, man, it takes what it takes. However many times you need to work on them. We never really stop.
So at some point you were reintroduced to the book with an open mind. Tell me what that was like, that relationship you had with that. What was that like going through that for the first time?
Well, I went out to Copac reluctantly. I didn't really want to go. I was mad. And Daniel may remember. I don't know how much he remembers about me.
Not a whole lot.
Yeah. Well, we were in huge fog. So, they put me in the what they call the infirmary?
Yeah.
It had a name.
Yeah, the infirmary.
They call it. But anyway, I was in there for 3 days or so, detoxing again, and finally was released into the population. And I was just angry. I had on some sort of hat. I think it was like I don't remember, but I had on some sort of headgear, and that was forbidden at Copac. You couldn't wear it. You were not allowed to wear any kind of hats. And I refused to take it off, of course. So, there was about a week there where, Mr. Defiant wouldn't take his hat off. And I went through a series of these things. Like there was a ladies' facility at Copac and a men's facility, and there was a little creek that separated the two with a bridge. And we were told we could not go on to the property where the ladies' facility was. So I would just go out and stand in the middle of the bridge. And this got to be such a problem that at one point they sent 3 or 4 guys out there to remove me.
Bouncers.
From the bridge. I knew about
You're
bouncers.
the wrong guy,
I'd
man.
employed a lot of them. And so they came prepared to physically move me off the bridge. It was a standoff.
American badass over here. Look at you go.
I was just so mad.
man.
Yeah, I tested them constantly on things like boundaries and isolation. I was like, I'm not going to.
Stand on this bridge by myself.
Kind of got into a scuffle or two. But yeah, it took me a while. But that night when they removed me from the bridge, I remember this very clearly. One of the counselors followed me back to my room and talked to me and sort of talked me down. And he told me about expectations, about the higher the expectation, the lower the serenity, and that concept. For some reason, it sort of got through to me, and I remember thinking about that. And then I had a spiritual experience at Copac. I literally in the big meeting, in the mornings when you'd have the big group, I noticed a number of the guys getting down on their knees, and I remember saying to the fellow next to me, I said, "Are these guys like Catholics or something?" He said, "No, man, these are the guys who are serious about their sobriety."
Damn.
I thought, how about that? They're humbling themselves.
Jesus Christ.
And I'd never gotten down on my knees before.
Yeah.
So I began to secretly get down on my knees in my little cabin there that I shared with 7 or 8 other drunks. And I began to pray to God, who I didn't know much about. What I did know, I wasn't really interested in, to help me to relieve me of the craving and help me to, I had this thing called internal gnawing. I actually had a name for it. I mean, I had it all sort of figured out. I said, I suffer from internal gnawing, and people would buy me a drink. And it was this internal, inside stuff that just wasn't right. And it was noisy in there.
Yeah.
It was so wrong. But I would pray to God to relieve me of the craving, alcohol, and the internal gnawing. And I did that for a week or two. And after prayer one morning, I came to, and the internal gnawing was gone. Wow. I couldn't believe it. I'd been listening to this for years and years and years. And I said to myself, if you can do that, maybe you can do some other things. Yeah. And I began to get more and more serious about the program, the process, the book, in treatment. I don't know about y'all, but in treatment, we work 1 through 3. And then on 4, we were released to the outside world. So, I began to read the book. I began to pray publicly and privately, get on my knees in big group, and quit fighting with my counselor. And things began to change. And it all sort of turned around for me there. I took my hat off. I quit getting into scuffles with people, and things begin to get good. But anyway, that's sort of that's kind of how it happened for me. And I stayed for the whole 3 months, did aftercare.
What did that aftercare look like?
Well, it was 2 or 3 days a week we would meet, and the thing was, again, you work 1, 2, 3. You were supposed to find a sponsor, start going to meetings, and to work the steps. So I found a sponsor
Right away.
And began to work the steps with the sponsor. Worked them all, finished up aftercare.
Did you go back to your same environment? Were you up above the bar?
That's a great question. The one thing I knew was I probably wasn't going back there. And this was a really tough thing because my brother Hal and I, we created that place, and we drank together, and we drank every afternoon together. And that was a hard breakup. I'd been through a divorce, so I knew what it was like, but now I had to divorce my brother because he wasn't going to quit drinking because I'd quit drinking. And he didn't understand why I didn't want to come down to the bar every afternoon at 4 and hang out like we did for all those years.
Was he mad about it?
He was hurt.
Yeah.
He came to family at treatment, but I don't think he understood exactly. He used to say to me, "Why can't you drink, like a man? Why can't you drink like I drink?"
Yeah.
Did he not have the ism?
He had it.
Did he?
But in his mind, he didn't have it.
Did y'all have it anywhere else in your family?
Yeah, great uncle. My dad used to warn me all the time about the perils of alcohol that was in our family. To be careful, and I did, up until a certain point.
Yeah. So you didn't go back?
No. So I went home. I was fortunate. I didn't lose everything. I didn't kill anybody. So I was released, back into the population, and I went back to my house in Belhaven. But I knew I couldn't go back to Hal Mal, so that was not going to be in the cards. So Katrina hit about this moment. So I'd been sober about 6 months when Katrina hit. And Katrina did a number on my world.
Yeah.
I owned 5 pieces of property in Bay St. Louis, and then I had this house in Belhaven where I was living. And Katrina was so bad that it knocked down probably an 80-year-old oak tree in my yard in Jackson that crushed both of my vehicles that were parked in my yard. And I saw this happen. I walked out into my front yard at dawn on August 29th, and I heard a crack, and I looked up, and I saw this 80-year-old oak tree come right across my driveway and smash both of my vehicles in Jackson.
Yeah.
Then I had to figure out, what my property in Bay St. Louis looked like. I had a house that was my primary house, and I had 2 or 3 rental properties and some other lots. So anyway, long story short was, by the time the government would allow us back in there, I didn't know if any of my property was standing or not. And when I got down there, I figured 2 of my houses, the tops were blown off, the roofs were blown off, and they were in bad shape. But my main house was standing, but it received 5 feet of water. So I had flooding to deal with. No insurance, wrong insurance. There was wind and water. My insurance company said, "You got no coverage." So I was down there slopping out my house, literally, figuratively, throwing away half of what was in it. Everything from 5 feet down had to go. Everything from 5 feet up looked as if nothing had happened. On my way down there to discover whether or not I had a house and had things, I had noticed before I left my house, I had checked my email, and one of the emails was from the Mississippi Arts Commission, and it was entitled, "We are still looking for an executive director." And when I looked at it, I paid no real thought about it. I just clicked. I looked at it, delete, next email, delete, next email, delete, get in the car, start driving to the coast. By the time I got to Hattiesburg, my mind kept going back to this email, and I thought, I could be the executive director of the Mississippi Arts Commission.
Why not?
So I had my cell phone, so I started calling people that I thought had some relationship to the Arts Commission. And by the time I got to the coast, I had discovered that Robert St. John was the chairman of the search committee.
Wow.
He was a great friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I had reached him. He had fled Hattiesburg up in Tennessee with his family because of Katrina. So he was displaced. I was displaced, but we had cell phones. And I asked him about this job. And he said, man, I'm really sorry. He said, we've already narrowed it to the 2 final candidates, and we've already set up interviews. But what a great idea, And I said, well, man, I appreciate the feedback. Hope you and your family do well. I'm going to get back in here in my shrimp boots and start slopping out my living room. And on I went. And a day later or two, my phone rang, and it was Robert St. John. And he said, are you still interested in an interview for the Arts Commission job? I said, yeah. I said, I thought the search was over. He said, well, it was, but I got to thinking about you, and I called several of the other board members and the committee members and said that you had inquired, and they said, if Malcolm White has inquired, let's reopen the process.
Oh,
That's
And
huge.
so he said, can you be in Jackson tomorrow at 2:00 in the afternoon?
drop the bucket and let's get
I
out
got
of
the
here.
shrimp boots
Yeah.
on. I got the slop all over me.
Can I? Yeah.
I throw it all together. I drive back to Jackson. I put on the one and only suit that I own. I go down to the Woolfolk State Office building, to the conference room, and I walk in to interview for this job, and I know every person on the board, but I didn't realize that I did. And the first question was, why do you want this job? And I said, well, I just got out of a recovery program. I'm an alcoholic. None of these people knew this.
Wow.
They had no clue. And I am in recovery now, and I am going to do something completely different than what I have been doing all of my life, and that you people know me about.
Wow.
And they were all just sort of quiet, and they said, okay. They asked 2 or 3 more questions, and they said, okay, thank you for your time. I go back home. I take off my suit. I put my slop clothes back on. I'm packing up my car. I'm getting ready to head back to the coast. My phone rings. It's the chairman of the commission. She says, where are you? I said, I'm at my house. And she said, can I come over? And I said, sure. So she comes over to my house and says, she has this giant stack of things, and she walks in my house and she puts this thing on my coffee table, and she says, this is all the information you're going to need. You're hired.
Oh, wow.
Can you start in a week?
Wow.
Wow, that's crazy.
And that's how I changed professions.
Were you nervous to tell them that you just gotten out of treatment and recovery? Like, were you nervous they were going to think like, oh, but he might go back out and we can't rely on him?
Never entered my mind. When I left that place and had changed my life completely, I decided I was going to tell the truth from that day forward, no matter what it was. And, I tell sponsees that, but sometimes I have to tell a sponsee, you probably don't want to bring this up. Like, if you're in med school, you probably don't want to bring this up unless asked. But for me, there was no question that I needed to say it out loud. I needed to own this. I needed for everybody to know who I was.
Kind of hold you accountable.
And I never thought, well, I won't bring this up unless somebody asks or anything like that. I just said, this is who I am, you need to know this. And they trusted me, and off we went,
I like how you say that, like, this is who I am. It's not so much of like this is a decision I made, so I'm going to change a couple of things. Like, this is who I am now, a whole new being.
Reborn.
Yeah.
I took the reborn thing very seriously. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and I used to say this a lot. We are reborn, not born again. There's a difference. I'm not sitting here telling you I've been saved. I'm telling you that I've been given a new life, and I'm starting all over again. I was 53 years old, and I had been round and round about it's too late. Why bother now? Just go to the bitter end. Just let it rip.
Can you imagine if you would have done that?
No. Grandchildren, no. The life that I have now, totally unimaginable. totally unimaginable. But no, I committed to changing everything. So that was that, and I worked 12 years at the Arts Commission. I had two tenures. I also, for 3 years, was the state tourism director. I got that job because I was at the Arts Commission. That was really interesting.
What were some of the biggest struggles you had in that job?
Well, the biggest struggle was the recovery from Katrina, which I committed myself to. That was kind of what I intended to do, was to show where arts and culture fit in recovery and why Mississippi's story was so important and how it was predicated on arts, culture, history. When I talk about Mississippi, you David earlier asked about being a Mississippian. I realized early on, and I don't really know how this clicked, but that, I was from here, and here was from me, and this was who I was, and I was proud of it. I think it was when I was living in California. I realized when I got out to California that I was never going to fit in out there, no matter how long I stayed or what I did. I found myself going to the library and checking out books on New Orleans and the South in California. And it dawned on me that I was a Mississippian, and that's who I was. And I could go fake it. I could go do other things. But if I really wanted to get anything done, I probably need to come back home where I knew the lay of the land. And I knew the lay of the land in Mississippi. And when I got back, I got busy being a Mississippian, and doing that thing. And to me, the thing was, we have this story in Mississippi. It's about arts and culture. It's about the humanities, and it's about creativity. We produce more writers, more artists, more singers, more, than any other state per capita in the union. That's why we have the Grammy Museum here. That's why we have the Blues Trail. That's why we have the Writers Trail. That's why we have all this stuff. It's because that's who we are. And I figured that out in about 1974. And I decided that was what I was going to be. No matter what my job was, I was going to be all about this story, the Mississippi story, this art and culture and history. And that was what I started being. And it just all fit into this Arts Commission, tourism, all the stuff that I've done. It just all worked out great. Promoting concerts, Jubilee Jam, Zoo Blues, putting on these shows at Hal Mal's.
Might I mention Christmas by the River?
Christmas by the River. I love Christmas by the River.
Yeah.
It just never really took off. But what a great program
So
that was.
what is it about Mississippi? Why? Because I sometimes I say or think the same things, but I'm just like, that's probably just confirmation bias. I'm here, and so I recognize more of it. But then again, when you start looking at the list and I think we just had an American Idol kid win. Yeah. It happens a lot. What is it about Mississippi? I mean, is it the blues? Is it a holdover from slavery that just causes so much, real life empathy, and just it comes out in what's going on?
Well, you hear all sorts of theories. Some people say it's the water. Some people say it's the struggle.
It's not the water.
It's I think they mean more the Mississippi River than what we drink here in Jackson. But it's because we have so little that we've created our own world. Writers write because they're creating an alternative world. And those alternative worlds, as it turns out, is what we call art. And we ooze of art and artists and creativity here. People make up their own fun. They make up their own stories. They're great storytellers. I used to say Mississippi is 2.9 million storytellers. If you meet a Mississippian anywhere, they're going to tell you a story. Where are you from? Well, let me tell you. Oh, you know that guy? Oh, well, my aunt.
Yeah.
But so we're just this sort of poor, rural, agrarian, makers of our own fun, doers. We refuse to not, have things, and so we have to make them up. That's just my take on it. But more importantly, for me, it wasn't about why is Mississippi this place, but it was just I discovered that it was, that Faulkner and Welty and Tennessee Williams and B.B. King. I mean, the list, Elvis, the list just keeps going. I mean, it goes on and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. I just realized that was the land where I came from. And I was going to be a part of that. I was going to be all about that. I was going to have concerts with B.B. King. I was going to celebrate. I booked and promoted Elvis Presley Festival in Tupelo. I was going to be all about that stuff. And so I was. And it was just a good fit. And it's always been, since about 74, it's been the thing that I've talked about and done and said. And it's just proven to be my life's work without even trying.
What are a couple things about Mississippi that you would change if you could?
Oh, Lord. Racism, the whole slavery thing, the civil rights movement.
No, current Mississippi.
Same stuff.
Yeah?
Yep. A lot of that stuff is just dressed up and has a different name. And
like how?
Well, I think we tend to elect people who do not dare to change all of these things that have troubled us for so long. We tend to just kind of go with what we know. And, it took forever, for example, to change the flag. Now, why was that so complicated?
Yeah.
Why did it take us so long to remove the stars and bars from our state flag? Have you ever asked yourself that? Why did it take so long?
Mm-hmm.
Because we didn't want to change. We didn't want to admit that this was a mistake, that it's time to move on, and on the story goes. We will not expand Medicaid here in this state. And I could list a lot of other things, but this is not a political interview, and I'm not running for office. But
you got those
Although
political, those political genes almost, though.
Education, this session of the legislature, we finally fully funded public education. We should have been doing that. Integration. Segregation. The way that we created the academies and stuff. Not all places did, but as a state, we did not integrate well.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity in the 60s and 70s, and we said, no, we're just going to keep everything separate but equal, we said, which was not true.
Yeah.
But anywho.
I've found the longer I've stayed sober and going to meetings and having what we do, open mind, honest, willing, and do these things, I've begun to have a lot of the same thoughts, ideas that you're talking about. Some of the things are just a crying shame, and I really wasn't aware of them in my drinking days. I just didn't even think about them, and I was just looking for more, wasn't considering anybody else's drama, what was going on. But now that I've gotten sober, aware, it's like, whoa, man, this is some heavy stuff. What are some things, because that's what we want to do. We want to improve our lives, and we want to carry the message, right? And the message is like, people can get well. If you're suffering from alcoholism, you can get sober. But also, if you're not suffering, we can help each other out. Sure. So what are some things that you're aware of right now, or you'd like to share that might begin the change forward? Because you mentioned some really heavy things about poverty, racism, segregation, but how do you see what you've done in your recovery work and what we're doing in our recovery work that might be able to kind of spread into the general population?
Well, we could expand Medicaid to start with so that the rural hospitals, of which we have many, would be able to provide health care. We have a lot of people in this state who are poor and undereducated and do not have insurance and cannot access health care. It's a sin. It's a sin. And I don't know how we can justify that it's okay to do this, but we do. But I think that would be a great place to start. Fully funding public education would be another one. Providing for special education for kids who need special. Mississippi does not do a good job of providing for kids with learning differences. Most of the programs in this state that are available are private and expensive. If you are diagnosed with autism and you need ABA therapy, It's really expensive, and most people can't afford it.
What were the numbers on how?
1 in 36
1 in 36
today
children.
are born with some degree of autism.
That's one in every class. That's the size of a classroom. That means
Unbelievable.
yeah.
Stuff like that, how about just love one another and lend a helping hand and picking up litter?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be these gigantic seismic shift things, though there are plenty of those still left to be done in Mississippi. But they're just little acts of kindness that I think that we could focus on in our daily lives. And again, because three of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, we're in a program that teaches us to help other people. And it teaches us to be empathetic. And I don't know about y'all, but I wasn't very empathetic when I was out there whipping and a whomping. I was kind of focused on myself. And I think that's kind of where a lot of our leadership is today, is focused on themselves.
Yeah.
And I think if we could get focused on the 2.9 million people that we call fellow Mississippians and neighbors and family and storytellers, I think we could move the needle.
Yeah.
So tell me, what does your life look like now?
Oh man, my life is so good. I am quote unquote retired, so for the most part, I don't go to an office. I don't report to anyone. And the thing I'm most proud of is I don't kiss anybody's ass anymore.
You're here.
And I don't have any employees. And I've had employees since 1974.
How does it feel?
It feels great. But what I do have is I have a loving wife and a great family, and I got 2 grandkids. And
They live here?
yeah, they live like just around the block from me.
Nice.
So like I am covered in grandparenting and love every minute of it. But I get to pick and choose. I do what I want to do when I want to do it. I'm on a bunch of nonprofit boards because I think it's part of giving back. I think it's.
What boards?
I'm on the Walter Anderson Museum of Art board in Ocean Springs. I'm on Downtown Jackson Partners board, which oversees downtown, the downtown Jackson area. I was on the Yana board up until recently. But I'm on 3 or 4 boards and commissions and, advisory type capacity so that I can continue to be involved. I'm real involved in the Belhaven neighborhood
I love
association.
Belhaven.
I'm on 2 or 3 committees and I'm part of all of that.
Such a cool area.
I think in order to really be successful, you have to start where you are, where your feet and hands are. And then, if you want to also, affect the global, the greater global good, then you can do that too. I mean, you can recycle. There's all sorts of things. But when I retired, I decided I was going to sort of get small and get close to my house and be real active in things that are closer to home. Because I was a statewide operator for 15 years. My territory was the entire state, 82 counties, 2.9 million people, arts, tourism. That was my job. So when I retired, I thought I'm going to focus on Belhaven, my street, Gillespie Street, Jackson, downtown Jackson, more specifically. So that's kind of what I'm focused on these days. The Yana Club.
Yeah. What's
Being a
good
sponsor.
in Belhaven is poppy pies.
Great. Right around the corner
Pepperonis
from my
they
house.
put on their pizza.
This episode is brought to you by Poppy Pie.
Yeah. The way they cup up and hold that little bit of
You like that.
delicious umami, as we say, the 5th flavor. Oh, it's amazing.
So good.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to go.
Well, the whole Belhaven Town Center thing is remarkable.
It's
Isn't it?
so cool.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. And Belhaven has lost a lot of things. We lost our grocery store recently. We've lost both of our drugstores recently. And and some of Baptist Medical has moved to Madison. So there's reasons to be nervous about that kind of stuff. We lost Finian's.
Yeah.
That was an
But
institution.
we have gained all that is in the Belhaven Town Center.
Yeah.
So that's really reassuring and encouraging that all of these things we lost, we also have gained a bunch of stuff too.
You're what we would call in the room sometimes a high functioning alcoholic. You know, you came in, you had a good run before, you're involved in a lot of different things, playing sports, got a good education, traveled around, did a lot of just things that were really, really, just really cool to do. And then you got sober and you continue to do that stuff. My question is, how did you kind of balance the quest for spirituality and this, like, I mean, you're all over the place. Like, are you picking things? Are you really seeking God's will? Are you just going with are you just that cool? Like, is it just happening? Because it's just amazing. Because I mean, everybody in this room right now, like Danny's doing the podcast, and he wants to promote messages. He wants to put stuff out there. We're all trying our own way to be, I wouldn't say aggressive, but to do cool stuff. And then you just do it so effortlessly. How what's the secret sauce? What's going on?
I don't know. I don't have any clue about that, except that, you know, my spiritual journey is, you know, hour by hour, day by day, morning by morning, prayer by prayer. You know, it does not come effortlessly to me. I was not born a spiritual being. You know, I was born a hellion. So that's work. That requires every morning in the readings, every morning on my knees, prayer all throughout the day. I don't mean just like maybe once after lunch. Like, I don't treat prayer like brushing my teeth. I pray all the time. All the time. And I'm still flawed as I can be. There's so many weird, crazy things that go on in my head, things that, you know, character defects I need to work on, shortcomings.
Is humility something that you continue to struggle with?
All day, every day.
Like when we just called you cool?
Well, I
You're
don't
like,
think
I am.
much.
I am cool.
I don't
No, I'm
think
just
much
kidding.
about that.
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
No, but for real, like when
But
people,
humility, yes.
because they recognize you everywhere. You know, the Mississippi Arts Council literally redid their entire search because Malcolm White was interested. Like stuff like that would go to my head like so much. Someone told me I look cute like 6 days ago. It's still going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
can't imagine. Like how do you deal with that? It'd be weird if you didn't struggle with it.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, honestly, but I've kind of been a public figure for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm not bragging. I'm just stating
Was
the
true.
facts. My name is on a lot of things. Hal and Mal's, for example. Mal's St. Paddy's Day Parade, so forth and so on. So I spent a lot of years and I worked really hard to create that brand, what people today would kill for a brand like that. But that being said, I know that it's not worth anything if I'm not sober. It has no value whatsoever if I'm not on the spiritual journey, if I'm not helping others, if I'm not answering my phone, if I'm not going to a meeting, if I'm not getting down on my knees. You know, I think, David, that we're all born with certain skills and personalities. A lot of people don't know that I'm somewhat dyslexic. I've struggled with spelling and vocabulary, which is, you know, I wasn't blessed with a great early education. I went to a rural school, and I sort of faked on my way through school. I made C's. I wasn't very smart. A friend of mine used to say to me, he said, you know, you're not very smart, but you're one of the most perceptive people I've ever been around. You can walk in a room and read it in minutes. I mean, that's just God given to walk in a room and be able to size up everybody in it and everything going on in it really quickly. Like, well, I know what they're doing. I know what they're thinking. I know what, I know the lay of the land here. So that was like a intuitive thing that I was born with. My father had it too, But I struggle with, other things, just, like I say, somewhat dyslexic. I look at things and I mispronounce them. They're backward to me. I don't know which end is which. My wife just has the best time poking fun at me when I incorrectly pronounce things, or when I see something and I try to read it out loud and I jumble it all up. On radio, it's really tough, David. We're talking about radio. I have a script sometimes, and they'll throw things in front of me for me to read. I'm not a reader.
Yeah.
If I don't get a chance to read over it once, I like panic.
Yeah.
Now, I can talk ad lib all day, all night long, but if you put a script in front of me and my job is to read it, like, I panic because I'm worried that I'm going to come to a word I don't know or a punctuation that's unfamiliar to me. So there's plenty still there that I have to work on all the time, Now, I write because it's disciplinary. I write because it makes me a better reader. I write because it helps me to spell. So I spend a lot of time at 74 still trying to get better at things, just basic things.
Yeah.
So, maybe I'm a lifelong learner. That's one thing, maybe. It's important. I don't ever think that I know anything. I'm always trying to figure it out and learn more. And but humility, is something that I do work on, and I think I could probably use a little more of.
Besides getting ready for your radio show and maybe doing some journaling, what else are you writing? Are you writing anything that
I write
might ever
stories.
see?
I write songs. I have a piano. I sit down and every day I play chords and I look for words to go with chords.
Yeah.
And, I don't pretend to be a musician or a songwriter or a writer of any kind, but I have published 2 books and I do write all the time. I write short stories. I write poems. I write lyrics to songs, not because I sit and think, well, these people in Nashville are going to want to hear these someday.
Yeah.
It's not even hardly that.
Yeah.
It's because of the way it makes me feel when I do it. Creativity is its own high, as you guys know. When someone compliments you, or when you think of something really cool, like an idea or a notion or a rhyme, or if you just think of a good name, if you've been thinking about, what am I going to call this? And boom, that comes to you. There's that that endorphin thing that happens. Well, I get that from just sitting down at a piano, making a mess, being noisy, and searching for chord. Like, does this, that doesn't go there, sort of, and spending hours doing what I think is one of the most valuable things human beings can do, and that is losing track of time. It's meditation. It's what it is. I was fortunate in my life to have actually learned transcendental meditation. And this is a great story that I will share with you. The woman who was my guru in TM, Transcendental Meditation, also went to India with the Beatles and studied with the Beatles when they all got into TM. That's
cool.
And they wrote a song about her entitled Dear Prudence.
Oh, wow.
No way. Wow. Yeah.
That's cool.
See, how does that story make you feel?
It makes me feel jealous.
Feels good.
Meditation is one of these big things that we talk about. We don't really see it a whole lot because we don't have meditation meetings. We don't have a lot of the places that kind of endorse or kind of put it out there. Could you give a little 2 or 3 to the listeners who are thinking about, like, how do I do that? Could you share with us some tips and techniques for some real good meditation?
Well, in TM, you literally get a mantra.
Is that given to you, or do you pick it?
It's given to you.
Okay.
And it is a multiple syllable sound. It's not a word. It's sound. It's just a bum, bum, bum. And and you just repeat it until you stop repeating it, and it just sort of jumps in and takes over your mental state, and you can then release all of the other noise. You know, what am I going to have for dinner? What time is that appointment? Are these the right socks to go with these shoes? When you get into TM and you begin to transcend, then you let go of all of these nonsensical thoughts that clutter the mind. Another way to do it is through exercise. If you're on your bike and you're in the zone, you're not thinking about your socks and shoes and what's for dinner. You're on this you've left, you know, your proper self for a little while.
Right.
When I play music, I get it. When I write, I get it. When I meditate, I get it.
Yeah.
When I swim, I get it, because the swimming takes over from all the other chitter chatter that's going on. But, you know, when I got into AA and I, you know, discovered that we talk about meditation, I was really jazzed, because I had already,
let's do it. Yeah.
I had already been doing TM, you know, and I thought, it's a chance for me to use my TM. But I discovered that they were really sort of talking about something else, a little bit different than that. But I said I didn't care what they were talking about, that I was going to use TM with prayer and meditation. That was going to be mine, and it is. But I do know that, you know, broken down, what we say about meditation is, you know, prayer is when you talk to God, meditation is when you listen to God. I mean, that's the simple yin and yang of it. But it is one of the most difficult things that a human being can do, which is to quiet the mind, to lose track of time, particularly in busy world that we live in. Phone going off, kids, sirens, the TV's on. You know, there's so much going on. It's just almost impossible to turn it off and tune it out and break it on down. But for me, it's a joyful place. You know, I pray and meditate. Sometimes I meditate solo. Sometimes I pray solo. But I love the combination of the two, of giving yourself a break from the madness that is the human existence. But I don't know if that's helpful, but that's the way I do it. Yeah. But this mantra thing is good because it has this effect of what I call tying up the mind, where it can't, you know, it can't obsess about, you know, did I return that phone call? Have I taken care of that thing? Did I put the thing back where
Monkey
it went?
mind never stops.
Monkey mind.
Oh yeah, never goes.
But good meditation, you know, replaces monkey mind for a period of time. In TM, they teach you to do 20 minutes a day. Now that I don't do that, but I have at times in my life done the 220s. But if you can do a 20 or a 10 or a 15, where you're not thinking about all the other stuff, and then you add your prayer component to it,
it's a solid practice. Yeah, it's a good practice.
It's a beautiful thing.
Man, I look forward to seeing what else you're going to do. I love seeing you around. I really do. You always offer light and hope and just doing cool stuff, man. I know Daniel and I, we talk a lot about you, about all the cool things you're doing. I love listening to that first podcast when you talked about just promoting the parade and talking about Christmas by the river. I mean, it's just been, you've had an extraordinary life. I know we're going to get more good stuff out of you. So just keep doing what you do, man. Stay sober and keep getting out there and being curious and talking about it, because we love it. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all for having me.
It's been great. It's a good time.
All right, everybody. You want to take it out?
Yeah, sure. Don't forget, Run for Read is July 17th?
17th.
Okay, yeah, 17th. We'll post something about it in the show description. Get signed up. I'll be there. It's going to be a good time. And remember, if you're looking for a spiritual experience, please look for the Hope Ultra Facebook page and just follow along and pray for my sweet friend. All right. Y'all have a good week.
We'll see you next week.